Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Falvey, Editor-in-Chief of Boating Magazine. Welcome to Boating Roundtable. We got some big news last night. Evinrude outboards have ceased production, and we thought we'd go round the table giving our personal and professional recollections of Evinrude outboards. I'll start with Jim Hendricks. Jim, welcome from California, and tell us about your experiences with Evinrude outboards.
Well, it goes way back, Kevin, 35 years or more. I've run everything from the 9.9 on a little skiff all the way up to a 275 horsepower Johnson V8. And actually have very fond memories of all the motors that I've run. A few not so fond memories. We had the OMCC drive that I ran had the infamous variable ratio oiling, or VRO system that
I owned a VRO myself.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody disabled those.
That's right. Made us all want to just go back to putting oil back into the fuel. But overall, very fond memories. And I tell you, I think that Evinrude has been a real innovator in the market over the years. Probably some of the greatest innovations in outboards have come from direct fuel injection in outboards, the fixed system as it was originally known. The C drive itself was a great innovation. So the whole idea was, instead of having a cutout in the transom, and all outboard boats in that day had them, which allowed water to come in over the back of the boat in heavy seas. The idea was, let's put a bracket, let's put some sort of bracket on the back of the boat and attach the outboard to that. That not only blocked the seas from coming in over the boat, but put that outboard a little bit higher and allow the outboard to run more efficiently than it would normally just on a cutout in the transom. Now that led to what we have today, or outboards on brackets, or integral brackets, or bolt-on brackets. You see them all the time. In fact, you see very few outboards on cutout transoms anymore. So the
Right.
C drive, while it wasn't as successful as they hoped, led to great innovation in the boating market today.
True
Yeah,
enough.
it was a great idea.
Is one of the
The
best.
execution was not bad, but they had the right idea, because the whole industry is that way today. Bracketed outboards. We don't even use the word bracket much unless it's a bolt-on bracket, right?
That's right.
So it's just the way outboards are built, basically.
Right.
Graded transom bracket.
The integral motor brackets.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, my first family boat, my dad bought in '63. It was a Johnson, which at the time was an Evinrude that took a left turn on the paint line. And my first personal boat was a Evinrude, a 25 horsepower Evinrude on a 16-foot John. I used to sell them when I worked for Mercury Marine, which was a marine owned by my in-laws at the time. We had a resort and a rental dock as well. But I actually worked for OMC back when the new direct injection technology was coming about. And, I've got to say, having spent as much time as I spent back in engineering, there were some brilliant people back there. They were consulting with Purdue engineers and engineers from Michigan University. And the direct injection technology that was on the Evinrude motors that had just been discontinued is in operation right now in most automobiles. If you'll look at your automobile engine line, it's going to usually say DI after it, direct injection. And in spite of the fact that those were 4-strokes, they were still using direct fuel injection because it so precisely injected the fuel into the cylinder. It's very efficient.
Right, and Evinrude could be credited with that.
Well, and a 2-stroke engine.
Evinrude could be credited with.
Yeah, well, Evinrude. Well, Mercury had their Optimax system. That was different. It didn't end up becoming what we find in automobiles
they had DFI.
now.
Before that, they had DFI. Remember DFI?
Yep. Direct fuel injection.
Yes.
Well, and then there was also a lot of confusion between fuel injection and direct fuel injection, because there were fuel injectors that put instead of carburetors. Yeah. But
right.
Anyway, that you look at the history of that company. When I worked at OMC, we were still based in Waukegan. The factory there had been around. There was people like Charlie Strang in there, who was one of Mercury's top engineers, and it was legendary, and it was like working for, if you were a football fan, working for the Chicago Bears. And mostly I just feel bad for some of the guys that I know that have worked there their entire career, like Larry Koshak and Carl Sandridge, and George Broughton, even one of the top engineers. And it's sad for those guys to be standing here watching this go away.
Personal relationships with people who work for decades that we know, and sadly, hopefully they find a place today.
Yeah, you know what? With the development of the Evinrude E-Tech, the G2 series in particular, those engines were fine engines, and they're in many ways were superior in terms of torque, in terms of acceleration, in terms of weight. They had innovation. They have innovations like integral steering that you're seeing in many outboards now coming out from other manufacturers. I think if we were to point one finger at the reason for Evinrude not really being a success in this market now, it's because of the insistence on two-stroke. Two-stroke is not bad technology, particularly with the direct fuel injection system that Evinrude has. But the market...
E-Tech met all the carb standards. E-Tech met all the carb standards.
And in many respects was a cleaner outboard than four-strokes. But the market is gravitating or has gravitated to four-stroke technology for whatever reason. Perhaps it stems from the early... I don't know. The outboards of old were not exactly... Yes, two-stroke outboards of old were smoky. They smelled. They were noisy. And that was always equated with two-stroke technology. With four-stroke technology, got rid of all that.
Well, the reason that was so in a two-stroke is there was a period of time where the fuel and oxygen was flowing through the cylinder, and both the intake and the exhaust port were open. So there was basically a flow-through of fuel, air, vapor, and what direct injection.
The rainbow-colored water and the gray cloud. Was so much a part of the boating of my youth.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember being on Lake of the Ozarks as a kid, and on a Sunday night, getting in the water to cool off after working a hard weekend, and you could smell the gasoline everywhere. And that was a huge lake. It was just, it was pervasive.
Well, even today, you can be out boating, and I can hear and smell two-stroke from afar. I can say, oh, that guy's still running old two-stroke.
And it holds a warm spot in your heart, doesn't it?
And it should be noted, there's quite a number of antique Evinrude outboards running fine, But the newer generation, the E-Tech G2, they didn't produce rainbow water. They didn't produce a cloud of blue-gray smoke.
Well, George Broughton used to tell me, he said, what we are always looking for is a robust engineering solution. And that was... the two-strokes were robust because several things could go wrong with them and they'd still run well. And that was kind of, if there was a difference between a highly technical motor, computerized, electronic, like the E-Tech and G2, it was that there was a need for consistent voltage. You had to have an excellent alternator in the thing, or a stator, because they put their alternator mechanisms in the flywheel. You had to have good battery systems and good solid wire connections, and all those things tend to be the weak links in any marine environment. So, it wasn't surprising that some guys were frustrated. But I have a friend that's got two of them. He loves them. I had a couple that were problematic, but ultimately what they found out was something nobody looked for. That was a loose magnet in the flywheel. And when that was solved, my motors ran like they were supposed to.
Hey, Garrett, what's your experience with Evinrude? Have you had any personal experience with Evinrude motors? I know you've shot some for us professionally, but have you had any personal boating experience with Evinrude outboard motors?
Well, since we started chatting about this, you guys did remind me of my youth, going to a little lake in Northern California and fishing on just a little aluminum boat. Yeah, with probably a little guy like this, just a horsepower Evinrude, crank it up, stick your fishing poles out the side and go trolling for some trout. And that's what we used to do up in California every summer, actually, just Crest Lake. And the little me, probably third grade me, trying to be the big kid hanging out with the other big kids. I wanted to like start it, and I never could because I couldn't crank it right. But that's what we used to go fishing on.
Garrett, can you pop up that image of the?
My first outboard, and it was an Evinrude, or my family's when I was a kid. It was a small one like that too, Garrett. This was years before you were a gleam in Dad's eye. This was in the late '60s. We lived in an apartment in Queens, New York, and we had a 6-horsepower Evinrude. I believe it was a 6. My memory might be failing with it. And
there was
we
a
used
6.
that. We used to take that to the rental livery, and that was cheaper than renting the boat and the motor. We'd rent a rowboat and put our own motor on it, and that was a less expensive way. And that was in my very early years, 8 years old, 9 years old. That was how I got on the water until later on. We got boats and so on and so forth. Life went on, but so my history with Evinrude goes back to the very beginnings of my boating experience. And so many people are waxing, emotional about Evinrude, and certainly Ole Evinrude set this whole recreational boating industry in motion, basically by successfully bringing motorized boating, power boating, to the market. But for all of that and all of our good feelings, not enough people were bucking up and buying them. Right. I mean, you can talk about it all we want, and these feelings are real. These memories that we have are real and they're good, but not enough people translated those memories into a purchase. And so they had to stop making the motors. I mean, that's really the bottom line, right?
Yeah, that the decision looks sudden to us, but I was down by the Ralph Evinrude Test Center in February. It was apparent that was about to be bulldozed, and I thought at the time they must be getting ready to throw in the towel because nobody would take an iconic monument to Ole Evinrude and Ralph Evinrude like that and bulldoze it if they were going to keep going. And that was a sad thing to say.
How many boat companies ran their prototypes through that test center, Randy?
Oh, all of them. Back
in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, used that test center to trial their boats and see how they'd run with different horsepower engines.
Well, we conducted several tests through them and that place with Boating Magazine, and you all have been there, or most of you have. I got to say, though, that was to see the monument to Ralph Evinrude gone, to see the buildings rusted and disassembled was, it isn't a happy day for the marine industry.
Yes.
Well, we're running out of time. So Evinrude Outboards, on the heels of an announcement from parent company BRP, Evinrude Outboards ceasing production May 2020. This has been Boating Roundtable. Tune in next week. We're going to talk about how to store your fuel. Should you keep the tank full or keep the tank empty? Tune in next week. And don't forget to check the links in the comment section below for a lot of the references we discussed in this week's episode. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.